Tell me about when when things really went off the rails. I mean, particularly during the White Album sessions, when you could take no more.
It started to go slightly off the rails after we'd finished Sgt. Pepper, I guess, and Brian had died, and we went in straight, basically almost a few weeks later, to start the Magical Mystery tour things. When there's a sort of they were trying to reach for something that really was like better than Pepper, although we finished it a few weeks previously, which was impossible really tomorrow. I mean, everyone was exhausted, but they carried on, continuing on. Anyway, cut long story short, over the period of time when they came in to start the White Album sessions, they had the long hair and the different sort of attire on, and we were just normally we'd accept anything they sort of came in with and said, oh well, here we go again, this is this. So that was part of the job. So John wanted it to be like, I guess, his thing, whereas he always thought of Pepper as Paul's thing, I guess, because Paul was really Paul's concept about 2/3 of the way in of Pepper as the way that should be presented. So this was going to be like John's album, I think. So he was very sort of aggressive. The guitar amps went up in volume. That was the beginning of it, and I couldn't control the sounds properly, and things weren't sounding the way they should do because of the limitations I had and what they were doing. It just didn't marry. So this bad vibe was going on, and it wasn't a physical battle down in the studio between them. There was no physical violence or anything. It was just like musical violence. There was an aggressiveness going on, and they were really in control now. And George was sort of lost control as the producer who was dictating stuff to them. And to cut a long sort of story short, it was when we were getting that distorted sound on, because they were still after pursuing new sounds and this and that, and I still had nothing that I could plug in and say, wow, listen to this. I was still doing what I could with a pair of scissors and a bit of sticky tape and smoke coming out of this and smoke coming out of that. I was desperate, so I was getting this distorted sound from that guitar on Revolution, and I went in from one mic amp down in the mixing console into another one, and which I wasn't supposed to do. And John just looked down and said, 3 months in the army would have done you good. So I thought, God, So I just sort of kept my cool, and I was just sort of furious, and we'd mixed some other titles over and over again as well. And anyway, the weekend happened, and then on this particular Monday we redid something. And anyway, Paul was redoing his vocal on Obla Di Obla Da for about the 6th time, and he needed some direction from George Martin, because there was a certain rhythm Paul was hearing in his head but couldn't quite get on the vocal. And I think George made a remark, or try rephrasing the last word of the lines differently, and Paul, got really agitated with George Martin and said, "You come an expletive down here and sing it," and I thought, oh God, this is the end, and I was on the verge of a breakdown myself, because I was the one if anything went wrong, and I was the one they looked at. So the next day on the Tuesday, I'd slept on my decision that I was going to make overnight, and I said to George Martin, "I'm leaving." He said, "You can't leave," I said, "Well, George, I can't take this anymore, So he said, "Well, can you stay till Friday?" And I said, "No, I've got to just walk out that door now." I could not face lifting the fader up and hearing the guitar note, anything. So we went up to the manager and told him what my feelings were. And I went back down and told them. They were standing at the bottom of the stairs, and they were in a line. And it was John that actually spoke. He said, "Well, Geoff, it's not you. We know there's problems going on," because there was all the Apple stuff going on, the Apple meetings. There was lots of stuff going on. And he's sort of gesturing at this number 2 studio, as you saw, and they'd been incarcerated in there and living in there, and they had a little corner. And so he said, "Geoff, it's not you." He said, "We don't want you to go." And I said, "Well, I've got to." He said, "Well, And then he made the dig, which I'm sure was meant for Paul, about Sgt. Pepper. Oh, everyone thinks Sgt. Pepper was a great album, and it's a load of horrible stuff, So. That was it, and of course, in a way, looking back on that, it was the jolt to me that they needed. Although Richard, my assistant, who left a few weeks later, he left as well. He said that not much was said about me leaving, but he said things did calm down a bit down there. But it was the jolt that they needed, because no one did anything. No one was in control. They were in control, and it was falling apart. It was good on my part, because, I went back and built Apple Studios and recorded Abbey Road, because Paul said, "Come back," because they were missing some of the sounds and stuff, you know.